Hi, and welcome back to the channel. What do you have when one of the largest comedy names in the business sits down for what promises to be a lighthearted interview, only to discover that he is in the line of fire? An exchange that begins with a thunder of applause quickly turns into something much more heated. What began as fun becomes something tense, uncomfortable, and unforgettable. And by the end of it, one of the greatest figures of comedy walks off stage, leaving everybody shell-shocked. Before we get to this awesome moment, don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments below who you believe conducts better difficult interviews. Because after this, you may be seeing things differently. The evening was business as usual for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The crowd was buzzing, the band was playing, and all was copacetic. The energy in the room reached its peak when the evening's guest, Eddie Murphy, was introduced. Murphy was making the press rounds, hawking his new movie, and fans were anticipating the normal. Good vibes, light jokes, and amusing anecdotes. While the music played and Colbert performed his opening monologue, all seemed well. But the instant Eddie Murphy appeared on that stage, something wasn't right. The audience roared. Colbert cracked his trademark smile, but beneath the grins, there was a nervous vibe. Murphy's smile looked forced, his grin overly rehearsed, and Colbert's greeting, though courteous, was biting, as if this was not going to be a casual, cordial interview. "Eddie Murphy, everyone!" Colbert declared with a big grin as Murphy sat down. "It's great to have you. I have to say, following your career has been a ride, from the raw, unbridled comedy of your early days to the family-friendly fare. That's a pretty big change, don't you think?" It initially sounded like praise, but the pause Colbert made on the word evolution made it sound critical instead. Murphy heard it too. His smile-ready grin flashed just briefly before he replied. "Well, Stephen," Murphy said calmly, "I think any artist changes over time. That's part of growing. I've always tried to stay connected with my audience, whether it's through edgier material or something the whole family can enjoy." Colbert nodded, but his tone changed. "Absolutely, but some would say that what you define as growth is actually playing it safe. When was the last time you actually took a risk in your comedy? When did you ever push the envelope the way you used to?" The room fell decidedly silent. This was not a joke. This was not a lighthearted roast. It seemed almost an ambush, and Murphy definitely caught on. "I take risks constantly," Murphy said, a hint of edge creeping into his voice. "They may not be the same type of risks I took when I was in my 20s, but they're risks nonetheless. As you grow older, what you think is worth risking changes." "Maturity," Colbert echoed, sitting back in his chair with a grin. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Colbert replied, eyebrows raised. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot more like you spent the last 2 decades trying to distance yourself from what actually made you great. The rawness, the risk, the nerve to say what no one else would." Murphy's jaw clenched. It was subtle but unmistakable. "I'm not sure what you're trying to get at here, Stephen. I'm saying this groomed, PR-friendly Eddie Murphy we've been seeing for years now doesn't square with the brazen innovator we all grew up with," Colbert went on. "You used to burn down the stage. Now we're getting talking donkeys and fat suits. You used to be a lion. Now you look declawed." The shot hit its mark. Murphy shifted forward in his seat, the tension in the room growing thick. The charm was wearing thin. "You know what, Stephen?" he said, his voice calm but sharp. "You might be misunderstanding what courage in comedy actually means. It's real easy to sit behind a desk, take shots at someone else's journey. But when you're the one out there, with your name on the marquee, making opportunities not just for yourself but for others, sometimes bravery looks like knowing when to change." "Change," Colbert cut in. There's that word again, evolve. But evolution means going forward, growth, progress. What you've done? It appears more like retreating. You began as fearless and ended up formulaic. Revolutionary to marketable. The word lingered in the air like a stench. Murphy gripped the arms of his chair. For an instant, it seemed as though he might walk out. Instead, he breathed slowly and retaliated. "You want to talk about commercial, Stephen?" he said, eyes locked. "Let's talk about this show, the desk, the format, the fake laughs. It's the same thing we've been watching for 60 years. Where's your evolution? Where's your risk? You're basically just doing a smug version of Johnny Carson. Except Carson, at least, was actually charming." The audience gasped. Colbert's smile dropped, replaced with a cold, still stare. "Rich," said Colbert in a low voice, "from someone who's done the same movie 15 times with different costumes." Murphy didn't blink. "At least folks laugh at my films," he snarled. "Your program just makes people feel superior to whoever you're mocking that evening. There is a difference between comedy and condescension, though I understand how that could be confusing for you." The studio tension was so palpable, it was almost a hum. The audience didn't know if they should laugh, remain silent, or begin praying for a commercial break. The production staff must have been in full-blown panic mode backstage, attempting to recover from a conversation that was now a confrontation. "Know what your problem is, Eddie?" Colbert asked, his voice dropping into a more serious tone. "What gets you is that someone is finally voicing out loud what people in the business have been murmuring for years. That the Eddie Murphy, who once was a king of comedy, has made do with being the court jester." Murphy's eyes blazed. "And you, Stephen, know what annoys you," he said, standing closer. "That regardless of how many degrees you've accumulated or how articulate you sound reading from cue cards prepared by other individuals, you'll never make the same difference I made before I was even 25. You can covet behind your writers, your staff, your research. You can read off a teleprompter all day long," Murphy said, voice steady. "But at the end of it, you're still just another name behind a desk in a long line of late-night hosts. Me? I'm Eddie Murphy." The way he said his name, with full conviction and not a hint of apology, landed like a hammer. It was a statement, not a boast, and it clearly struck a nerve. Colbert's expression hardened. "You were Eddie Murphy," he replied coldly. "Now, you're just someone coasting on past glory, still pretending your best work wasn't left behind 2 decades ago." That was the moment. The instant the line was crossed, and everyone in the room knew that. Murphy stood up. No words. Just the scrape of his chair against the floor, and the shocked silence that followed. The audience was frozen. Even the band did not move. The cameras continued to roll, filming what was quickly becoming the most awkward late-night moment in recent history. For a few seconds, it looked like Murphy might just walk off the set. But instead, something even stronger occurred. He sat back down, slowly, deliberately, leaned forward, and stared Colbert right in the eye. The tension was electric. "You know what, Stephen?" he said, tone low but unambiguously firm. "I was going to let that pass. I was going to keep things polite. But perhaps it is time we had a real conversation." Colbert shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but remained silent. "Want to discuss my good times being behind me? Let's really discuss what those times were. About a 20-year-old kid from Long Island, Roosevelt, who stepped into Saturday Night Live and upended comedy. A young man who came up with characters that people still quote today. 40 years later, Mr. Robinson's neighborhood buckwheat, Gumby. Parodies so biting, they made Eddie Anderson himself laugh. Colbert's mouth opened, but Murphy held up a hand and went on, adding significance to each sentence. Let's discuss Raw and Delirious, two specials which not only advance comedy, they redefined it. Not merely for black comedians, not merely for edgy comedians. For everyone. I did not walk around the edges of lines. I walked over them, stomped on them, then remapped the territory. You want to discuss risk? That was risk. Colbert attempted to resist. Those were other times. You can't do that today. Things are different. Society changed, Murphy repeated with a sick laugh. Number society got afraid. Comedy didn't change. It got afraid. And programs like yours are part of that issue. The audience was bracing itself now. Yeah, you sit behind this desk every night and take the safest possible shots, Murphy said. You ridicule the people your audience already hates. You sermonize to the choir. You remain tidily within the lines. And you call that taking risks? You think that's courageous? Colbert remained silent, his own confidence once shaken. You want to know why I made those family films? Murphy said. Because I had something to prove, something you'll never get. I had to prove that a black comedian from New York could carry $100 million movie, that I could make kids in suburban malls laugh as loud as kids from the Bronx. I had to prove I wasn't just the angry black guy people could laugh at safely because I was trapped behind a mic on a stage. Colbert's face was flushed now, a visible blend of embarrassment and frustration. So you're saying your creative decisions were racially motivated? He asked accusingly. I'm saying they were racially relevant, Murphy replied. My life, my circumstances, my journey. You think I sold out? I evolved. I expanded. And I did it while opening doors that people like you didn't even know existed. Do you think I wanted to wear fat suits and play 5 roles in one film? Murphy said, exasperation finally breaking through. You think that was an artistic fantasy? That was me proving something. Proving I could disappear so thoroughly into roles that people would forget that they were seeing Eddie Murphy. That was me demonstrating a range that most comedians can't even touch. But at what cost? Colbert couldn't help himself and pushed again. You shifted from raw, honest voice to calculated entertainer. Murphy snorted a bitter laugh. Authentic? You talk to me about authentic? He leaned forward once more, his eyes meeting Colbert's. What in the world is authentic about you, Stephen? What's authentic about any of us? The lights? The scripts? The precision-timed laughter? You're performing a character too, the wise host, the guy who asks the tough questions. But we both know what this is. This, Murphy went on, is you trying to chip away at someone you view as the old guard, trying to make yourself seem up to date by cutting down someone who's done more for comedy than you'll ever do. That's ridiculous, Colbert responded hastily, but even he didn't believe what he was saying. Is it? Murphy said. Because from my seat, your entire career is predicated on being the smartest guy in the room. Like, the guy who tells people why they are wrong. And perhaps that flies with politicians, book writers, and the typical talking heads. But I've worked here longer than you've been out of school, and I can smell fear from a mile away. The studio was pin-drop silent, but cameras did not turn off. They recorded each flicker of emotion, each change of body posture. Back in the control room, producers were certainly freaking out, but they too could not avert their eyes. You know what your actual problem is, Eddie? Colbert declared, voice growing cold. You can't accept that comedy evolved beyond you. The shock value, the filthy jokes, the offensive punchlines, It's not what folks are hungry for anymore. They want something more intelligent, more sophisticated, more socially aware. Murphy's eyes flashed. Socially conscious, he echoed, voice rising. You mean cleaner, 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 approved by an executive committee and critics who have never made anyone laugh in real life. You think your comedy is intelligent? Your comedy is for people who are worried to laugh too hard in fear of someone canceling their brunch appointment. At least my comedy isn't based on old stereotypes and insulting caricatures, Colbert retorted. That was all. Murphy rose again, but this time he didn't return to his seat. He moved deliberately around the desk, bridging the space between them. Colbert tensed visibly. Old stereotypes, Murphy murmured, his voice cold as ice. You really want to do that? He stood over Colbert now, pausing. How about your stereotypes, Stephen? The condescending white liberal who sits in his studio and assumes he knows what's best for everyone. The Ivy League golden boy who assumes that because he read Baldwin in school, he has the right to lecture the man who actually lived the life. I never said I came from anything I didn't, Colbert responded, visibly flustered now. No, Murphy answered. You just behave as though where you're from makes you more qualified to decide where I'm from. As if your perspective is more enlightened, more evolved. But the thing about evolution, Stephen. He edged closer, voice low but biting. Actual evolution isn't about becoming whatever other people want you to become. Actual evolution is about becoming who you're supposed to be. Despite what anyone might believe, Murphy stated, striding back toward his chair, but not sitting down. He grasped it with both hands, his voice firm but calm. I grew, he went on, from a boy who had nothing to a man who made actual opportunities for hundreds of individuals. I grew from being instructed that I'd never be anything greater than a gimmick to discovering that comedy has no color, no fence lines, no ceilings, only the boundaries we put on ourselves. And you? He looked straight at Colbert, his voice becoming more acerbic. You went from being a person with promise to one who employs that promise to demolish the very individuals who cleared the way you now tread upon. That's not what this is about, Colbert shot back. But his tone was still thinner now, less firm. Then what are you talking about, Stephen? Murphy asked, taking a half step forward. Because from where I'm standing, it appears to be a jealous man, envious of another man's legacy, attempting to bring it down just so he can feel larger. It appears to be someone who realizes they will never be remembered the way I will, so they alter the narrative to make my achievements smaller. The air was thick with tension in the studio. Colbert clutched the sides of his desk until his knuckles were white. Murphy, openly fighting not to lose his temper, glared at him like the next word could shatter the room in two. Then Colbert snapped. His mask slipped. His voice shifted. And he spoke in a trembling voice, not of fear, but of something that sounded a great deal like rage. You want to know what this is really about, Eddie, he said, voice rising. This is about accountability. This is about someone finally having the guts to say what too many have been too afraid to say for years. That your comedy, as legendary as it was, hurt people. That it leaned into stereotypes that did damage. That it helped set back actual progress for individuals who didn't own the mic or the stage to stand up and take a fight. Murphy's gaze narrowed. His expression froze. Don't you dare, he said, voice low and menacing. Don't you dare make this some shallow moral crusade. Don't sit there and act as if you're talking on behalf of some hypothetical group that you believe needs to be saved. You know what actually hurt people, Stephen? Poverty hurt people. Lack of opportunity hurt people. Being told they weren't smart enough, clean enough, white enough, that hurt people. Comedy provided us with a means to survive all of that, a means to laugh when nothing else made sense. Nice way to sidestep responsibility, Colbert retorted, his voice loud. Just wave everything off, like say it's all just jokes. Act like it exists in a bubble, that there were no actual effects, that your words never hit actual people in the actual world. Murphy moved closer to the desk once more, his voice rising to that of Colbert now. You want to discuss consequences? He growled. The consequence of my comedy was that it opened doors for black comedians, for actors, for creators who looked like me. It demonstrated we could lead films, anchor shows, headline stadiums. The consequence was that I made it impossible to ignore us. And what about the other effects? Colbert asked, leaning forward now. What about the children who observed and absorbed the ridicule? What about the groups reduced to punchlines? The individuals flattened into cartoons just so someone in the back of the room could laugh? Murphy's hand came down on the desk, hard. The whole studio flinched. Don't lecture me, he said deliberately. Don't you dare lecture me on my community. Don't act as if you understand what my work did for people like me, people who came from where I came from, people who lived through what I lived through. The things I was describing, Murphy had said, advancing, voice keen and firm. You think you know more about them than I do? You think your analysis, your interpretation, your witty remark is truer than my lived experience. The room was silent, icily silent. No laughter, no applause, not even a cough. It hadn't been an interview for so long. This was visceral. This was personal. I'm not saying I know anyone's experience except for my own, Colbert answered, attempting to be calm, but his tone had become defensive. I'm saying that intent is secondary to impact, and the impact of some of your content, whether you intended it or not, was hurtful. Murphy's eyes narrowed. Impact trumps intent? He said again, slowly, his tone dripping with contempt. That's the kind of mentality that's killing comedy. That makes sense on the grounds that art should be criticized, not on what it meant to convey, but on how the most sensitive person in the room might possibly take it. That's how you wind up with comedy that is so afraid it will offend anyone. It doesn't actually connect with anyone. Perhaps that's superior to comedy that rallies by punching down, Colbert retorted. Murphy blew up. Punching down? You think I was punching down? I was punching up, Stephen. I was a struggling kid from Long Island, making fun of the ridiculousness of the world I was attempting to crash. I was speaking of my world, my people, my suffering. And you're the one punching down now, utilizing your platform to shame a career. Created out of nothing because it doesn't fit today's standards. Colbert stood there now, no longer attempting to conceal the anger. Those standards did exist, Eddie. Some of us just had the guts to live by them, even when they weren't profitable. Murphy smiled, but there was no mirth in it. Only incredulity. Courage? Is that courage? You call playing it safe brave? Toe the line and never cross it unless Twitter approves? Tell you what courage is, my friend. It's getting up on stage with nothing but your truth, knowing half the audience will despise you, and speaking it anyway. Your truth, Colbert echoed, his tone climbing with sarcasm. What if your truth harmed another person's truth? What if your platform shut up people who did not have a platform? Murphy did not even flinch. Then those folks should have constructed their own platforms, he responded unhesitantly. That is what I did. No one gave it to me, Stephen. No one said, here you go, Eddie. Here's your golden chance. I seized it. I worked for it. Each gig, each movie, each second of being in the limelight, I struggled for it. And now you try to undermine that because it doesn't meet your vision for what it means to be successful? I want to hold it accountable, Colbert replied, because success without responsibility is selfishness. Murphy glared at him in silence for a long while. Then he spoke, softly, but with the intensity of all he'd held inside. You know what, Stephen? I've been playing this game more than 40 years. I've had my share of critics, of doubters, of racists, you name them, but I've never encountered anyone quite as like you. Anyone who can turn another man's body of work on its head until it's all about you. This isn't about me, Colbert said, but his voice was cracking now. Everything revolves around you, Murphy exclaimed, his voice rising. This entire damn interview has revolved around you, your moral compass, your intellectual superiority, your right to sit there and judge. You didn't ask me here for dialogue. You asked me to play my role in your show, your story. An opportunity for you to be smart, sound enlightened, and receive your applause from those people who already think like you. Murphy slowly made his way to the edge of the stage, the tension of the exchange weighing in the air. But in going, he turned back once more to Colbert. Do you want to know what differentiates us, Stephen? He questioned, voice calm but biting. I made people laugh when they needed to laugh most. I gave them permission to see humor in the midst of suffering. I showed them to find laughter in their struggle, to feel less isolated in their suffering. He blinked, his eyes unwavering. And you? You make people feel smarter than everybody else. You allow them to look down on anyone who doesn't have the same worldview they do. That's not comedy, Stephen. That's just intellectual bullying with better ratings. Colbert's face turned red with embarrassment and quiet anger. If you can't handle being questioned on your material, he grumbled, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Murphy shook his head, amazed. Challenged? He repeated. This wasn't a challenge, Stephen. This was an ambush. You didn't invite me on for an actual discussion. You invited me here to try me, to penalize me for succeeding in a manner that you disapprove of. And you know what? I don't owe you that. He turned and started to walk off stage. Colbert, not willing to let it go, yelled out after him. Walk away, Eddie. That's what you've been doing for years anyway, walking away from anything that might actually challenge you to grow. Murphy halted. For a very long moment, he did not move. The audience was holding its breath, not knowing whether the argument was going to flare up again. But Murphy didn't turn his back. He just talked, steady and certain. No, Stephen. All I've been doing for years is heading towards something. Constructing something, creating something that will last longer than both of us. You'll spend the remainder of your career destroying what other people constructed. I've spent mine constructing something that can't be destroyed, no matter how hard people like you attempt it. And with that, Eddie Murphy left the stage. Colbert was left seated alone at his desk, his fingers interlocked in front of him, a soft flicker of regret or awareness crossing his features. The audience did not know whether to cheer or remain quiet. The energy had changed. Something that couldn't be undone had occurred. The cameras lingered on Colbert for a few extra moments, long enough for the full weight of the confrontation to sink in. Then, only at last, the broadcast went into commercial. What began as a mundane, promotional interview had turned into something far more profound. A moment of destiny for both men. A line in the sand regarding what comedy used to be, what it ought to be, and who gets to determine it. And from the shocked silence in that studio, only one individual left that confrontation with dignity intact. So what do you make of this jaw-dropping confrontation? Have you ever witnessed a late-night interview go so far, off script, undefined? Leave a comment below. Let's discuss the moment which shocked you most. and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that pull back the curtain on what really goes down when Hollywood politeness wears off